I'm Scott Whittam from Whittam Planning and Design, Kathy De Almeida from Whittam Planning and Design, and we'll introduce the rest of the team. I'll introduce them. I'll give a brief sort of outline of what's going to happen tonight, and then we'll go right into our presentation of some ideas and some concepts, and go through that fairly quickly so we have time to have a good conversation with you guys. I'm sure that there's questions or ideas, and we'll save at least half of this hour or so ahead for that conversation. So we'll start with introductions with David Lubin from Unchained Properties, and David and his team are the developers. And I have a little thing that will move you could see people's names. That way. Oh, this is, as we speak about the team, this is an image that we found early on in the process. It's about 1905. It's the site up there. It's them building, actually, one of the first buildings. And we just really like this image. So we, in introducing the team, it's nice to have this as a shot. So David Lubin, and then Paul Silvestri, our environmental attorney. Craig Jensen from Chantrell Jensen Stark. Craig and Tony Borghese, and Tony is somewhere over here. They are the primes, the lead architects for the project. Dirt Studios, Julie Bargeman and David Hill, and they're looking at initial master planning, landscape architecture, and site planning. Austin Marigold, we have Alex Marigold here tonight. Alex, some of you might know from Cornell. But also they are doing some outreach, some branding, and helping with the architecture team as well. Fagan Engineers is represented by Jamie Genzel, and they're doing civil engineering for the project. Myself, I'm working on the project planning, coordination, helping with the master plan and the approval process. And I'm working closely with Stream Collaborative, with Noah Demarest, who is looking at the zoning and the approval process as well. So we'll be working together on that. And last part of the team is Labella. They're doing environmental consulting as well. So with that, let me just give you a brief overview of what we're going to do tonight. So the first thing is we'll look at, for any project of a scale like this, you look at the history of the site. And this one has a particularly interesting history that we'll hear about. For ideas, for the aesthetics, for program, for what might happen on that site. We'll move after that into the nature of the place itself, the buildings, the site, and I think Craig and Julie will lead us through some of those images and some ideas of what's there right now, and then going into linking outward what can happen in the future as we plan out this with the site itself, with its landscape, but also with its connections to the community. And then we'll, as I say, we're going to do that fairly quickly. We'll see these images. It'll spark some ideas. It'll give you an idea of what our conversation has been so far, and then we'll have a conversation with you. This is just to see if I can get the right. Oh, I got it the first time. So almost everyone knows where this is, who is here tonight. But it's interesting how people think, oh yeah, the Emerson plant, I know it from seeing it from the Wegmans parking lot or from other places. Even on 96B, which goes immediately next to it, you don't see it all that clearly. And of course, Ithaca College on the hill here, and the connections to downtown Ithaca, Buttermilk Falls up in here. So we'll talk tonight a little bit about our approach to this project. We're at the very beginning. This is the entry conversation. We've been talking for a little while, but Unchained Properties has decided that we now feel confident to move forward with the team and to have a public conversation on the future of this site. The beginning explorations that we're doing are the buildings themselves for their aesthetic possibilities, the site itself and its industrial past, clearly there are not only these extraordinary opportunities of its proximity to downtown and all the potential of the beautiful buildings and the incredible view you have up there, but the challenges of its industrial past. There's ongoing environmental investigation I'm sure some of you either know about or certainly are interested in. We're getting a lot of details back right now from that exploration and from that investigation, and there'll be further meetings as the spring goes on, particularly on some of the items as we move into our review process with the municipalities, both the, let's go forward, both the town and city line goes right here, so the town is here, and the city of Ithaca is here. As we move through the review with both those municipalities, issues of traffic, issues of stormwater, issues of environmental remediation, all those conversations are yet to be had. As information is coming, we're going to have another meeting specifically on those coming up later this spring as we're gathering information right now. But this is the broad brush conversation. It's our start, and we're delighted to have you here. We thank you for coming tonight. With that, I think I will push another button. Oh no, we have one more. Here's the Ithaca Times cover of our project, which we're happy to have. And I'll hand this over to Julie Bargeman from DIRT. And I'll drive this for you.
Okie doke. Alrighty. As the previous slide showed, I think we're pretty happy that it's been affectionately called the Sleeping Giant, and we like to think that everybody will be excited that we're kind of poking it to wake up. And the first way we want to do that is actually to really celebrate its industrial past in terms of being a very, very vital part. What we've looked at and always wanted to celebrate with everyone is that how Morse chain has always been a really vital, or was, and now again can be a vital part of the community here. It's got an amazing productive history. You can see goes all the way back to 1880. Amazing products there, from cash registers to big automotive chain. Other eras that really show that it was at the center of actually the nation in terms of its innovation. And that you can see just super production evolving through all of the different eras that it was part of, both pre-war and post-war, or the major eras. It's so big that planes fit inside of it. And as you can see, it was a really important community socially, a lot of jobs. And again, so it's about celebrating, once again, that social history, and that this is a cultural landscape. And it could be that once again. Incredible old lithograph here of the complex and how it grew over time, and is just this amazingly extruded building. All of this to talk about how the intention here is to work with what's there, to really use the evidence of these site histories and use adaptive reuse to bring the giant into being a friendly giant that's awake again. And this is a diagram just making the point of those two eras, about how it has grown over time, and what that might suggest in terms of the reuse and the new reinterpretation of the factory. I think the most important idea that we would like to begin the discussion about, how we actually are throwing out this idea about it being called the Chain Works District. And the intention there is that it actually does become a new neighborhood within Ithaca, joining its neighbors of Ithaca College, the downtown, and Cornell, and really becomes a very friendly neighbor. We're hoping for that. And in thinking about how it is that this site could come back alive in terms of this factory precinct, this is just a diagram of how it may be conceived of in these three primary parts. And as you can see there, this is early concepts about programming on the site and how it might be distributed. And there's an idea here about the three parts. The south link that's associated with manufacturing, the center link that is a combination of the workshops, the maker spaces, residential, and the north link perhaps associated with offices. And that is associated right there at South Aurora with what we're calling the front door. And then further up going towards Danby, the side door and the back door. So there's already kind of an interesting hierarchy that's there on the site that we want to build upon. And what you see, probably, a little bit too faded here, but the intention here is to talk about how much we looked into the multiple histories of the buildings here. They have incredible personalities. So, building number 9 was predominantly the annealing area. Number 6 was the dry kiln. And what that leads to is kind of the game that we played of name it and claim it. So that the areas of the building would still keep their personality and become really named places, where, as you can see, with courtyards and terraces, there's also an idea of making public spaces that would welcome all of you in to going to now what would be the annealing courtyard or the dry kiln cafe. And here's basically where that front door is. This is building number 1. And you can see it's kind of a wonderful, we hope, welcoming front door into the factory precinct, which Craig is going to describe.
So Julie kind of brought us to the front door, and now we will go from here. We'll go inside. Before we do, take a look at the building on the left and the building straight ahead, because the first couple of buildings we'll see the inside of will be these buildings. So we'll go inside the building on the left. So this is the interior of that building that you were just outside of, and this would likely be repurposed for either office or potentially a loft residential use. And the thing about these buildings is they're really, really beautiful buildings, and the ability to reuse them is tremendous because they're substantial. We've got structural materials that we can expose within these buildings to really celebrate what we've got, the history of these buildings. So this one and the next one would be very likely repurposed for residential. This is the long extruded building that extends from building number 1 for about a quarter of a mile down the site, with really great views looking out these windows towards the city and towards the lake. There's also large manufacturing spaces that likely would be repurposed for that type of use. They could also be other uses, but there are some, as Julie mentioned, on the back end of the site that most likely would stay as manufacturing centers for the city or town. And there's other large spaces that we might turn into event spaces, or we might infill with additional structure to create additional square footage for residential units or other purposes. But we have a lot of really grand spaces like this, and you can see the materials here. We've got concrete and we've got beautiful wood floors, things that will make a nice space. And then we've also got a really great view. When you're up there, it's amazing what you can see, and you're very close to downtown, but you also have this incredible vista out over the city and toward the lake. Here you can see both that view that we were just looking at on the left-hand side, and then you can see Cornell, you can see the Uris Library Tower near the smokestack there. So the view extends really all the way around towards the north. One of the things we're looking at is how do we repurpose this into a neighborhood. One of the things that's happened over time is that these buildings have all grown together. Some buildings started out as individual buildings, but over time they were infilled, and we really have 800,000 square feet almost entirely of one contiguous building. So the idea in the repurposing of this site is to potentially take down a number of buildings, do some selective editing of what's there, saving the best and probably most historic buildings, and with this editing, maybe going to the next slide, creating public space, public realm, courtyards, streets, connections between these buildings, opening them up so that we can really make it a neighborhood again, or a neighborhood as opposed to just a large, massive building that's hard to penetrate and hard really to move about. And then after we create this editing and open up the site through these kind of by disconnecting the original buildings, then the next step really for us would be to connect to both downtown and up towards Danby Road and Ithaca College, really to knit our piece of the city back into the community. So how can we, through this, maybe some additions that we might make better connections both uphill and downhill, which is really the difficult places to move right now. It's much easier on this site to move along the hillside, but moving up and down, we've really got to do some work to facilitate that. This is a diagram that helps to explain the site, I think, a little bit. You know, for you, the buildings climb up the hill, and they step up this hill. Some of the buildings, as we're showing on the left-hand side of the slide, are relatively narrow and would be ideally suited to residential uses. They would, with the residential uses on the lower end of the site, they would get the best views. They would be all looking out towards the lake, and we could potentially provide parking, as you can see, underneath that structure, and we could provide roof terraces on the top for people's units to have really dynamic outdoor spaces looking out toward the view. So that might be one idea for the site. On the far right, there's larger spaces that back into the hill. They're supported by a service road that runs behind them. Those would likely be these workshops or manufacturing spaces or other types of workplace environments. And then in between is where we would do these removals, these kind of careful edits that we would make to create courtyards, a new street that would likely run, or a lane, more likely a small lane that would run between these buildings that would connect these courtyards and create these public spaces. That would be one place where we could have entertainment type uses or uses that would support and really promote activity on the site, as you can see in that courtyard that we've got right there. As I'm sure you know, there's a precedent for this type of work. This is a project that actually Dirt Studios, Julie, worked on for Urban Outfitters in Philadelphia, where they're taking spaces and repurposing them, public spaces like this, or spaces where people can meet and you can have events, and also smaller spaces on the next slide where you can occupy this for a business or for a residential unit. So there are a lot of inspirational images that we found that tell us that this can be a really successful idea, and it's just a matter now of figuring out how best to apply these kinds of approaches to our project. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Julie, and she's going to go over some additional precedents.
These are important to make the point that these kind of projects are very attractive to a lot of folks and have proven to be really successful economic drivers in other cities like Providence, Rhode Island. And in this case, another project that Dirt was honored to work on at MassMoCA, the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art. There is also an idea here that where we were really wanting to, sooner rather than later, before the site was completely developed, begin to invite the community in with what we would call cheap and cheerful ways in which, say, bleachers could be set up for cinema. Something as simple as that. But again, to begin to have in this case, an electrical factory, to just come back into the community as it was this kind of sleeping giant in North Adams, Massachusetts. And in that, I'd really like to have Alex talk about how it is that the spaces here could become alive.
Thank you. So you've seen the precedents that we've showed you, and there are many more of those, and you've seen the various diagrams that Craig and Julie presented. So as they mentioned before, the idea is careful editing. So we're going to show you a couple of images that might suggest some possibilities of what this editing might look like. So let's say this is the first building on the northern end as you enter the site from Route 96. So the idea was if you remove the roof, and so this is kind of the first image of it, and then the next slide, you end up with this really big multi-purpose space. So we imagine some of the possibilities that might take place there, like a big kind of yoga festival, for example, or an antique car show, and we're obviously going to keep the gantry crane, or the Chinese New Year celebration. Or, well, this is kind of another view of the same place, which might at some point become, let's say, a farmer's market. And so we did sort of several of these visualizations, again, just to suggest the possibilities. I mean, this is not a design by any means. This is just a kind of an idea of what might happen, what if. So there are a couple of more there. I mean, this is what we call the side door into the site, which happens kind of on the east, connecting potentially to Ithaca College. And admittedly, it's a fairly sort of scary-looking place at the moment, but with some very careful editing, it could literally become a very lively, pedestrian-friendly, kind of fun place to be. And it's part of the connecting corridor between the east and west. So basically between downtown and Ithaca College. Next. There is also, well, you've seen these images before, so we sort of tried to visualize what the residential area might look like. So here's somebody moving into their new apartment. We're looking out into the courtyard. Here's what it might look like on the outside. This is right there. Is that big wall is what the facade of Chain Factory that you see from, like it's been said before, from the parking lots of the big box stores. And immediately adjacent to it is a building right now which has a kind of undetermined use. So we imagine that at some point next, it could become a really lively place that activates that street, that has some sort of let's say a cafe or public use space that is active during the day and also at night. Scott. So there you go. So with that kind of idea that these things could become both active both inside and outside, we introduce, I think, the next thing, which is about linking outward.
Alrighty, Scott, let's look at this. Again, we showed this image earlier, and that is, again, to reiterate how we're excited about and wanted to visualize what this new neighborhood could be like. And that, in fact, it seems very distant right now, and that, in fact, it is very, very close. You can see it's a 5-minute walk to downtown, and really within it kind of hugs all the surrounding neighborhoods. And then with larger connections, we're especially excited about the Gateway Trail, completing a very important loop to both the natural and social resources of Ithaca. And Craig showed this before, that importance of this passageway that goes from uphill to downhill through the new Awake Giant, and that there are possibilities in the future if we look at it expanding into the context. The next one. And how it might possibly in the future become even more, connect even more heartily to the rest of the context. Okay.
So you've heard some of our sort of musings that we as a team have worked on in the last few months. This is, I remind you again, the beginning of a process. We're just embarking on this, and I think we kept it to about a half an hour. We have a good amount now of time for questions. Vicky has oh yeah, this is also a way to get in touch with us. So chainworksdistrict.com, and that is very, very new. So give us be patient as it develops, but certainly it can accept messages, and we'll be posting information there as time goes on. Again, we're back at this image. We'll be, as I say, having a series of public meetings as more information becomes available. We're in the period of deep investigation in every sort of way right now. So these conversations that we're having, hopefully with you this evening, will be important to us. So